The unfolding drama in The Bold and the Beautiful from Monday, April 20th, does not merely advance the storyline, it detonates it. What had long simmered beneath layers of secrecy, manipulation, and emotional restraint now rises violently to the surface, forcing every character involved to confront not only the truth, but the deeper, more uncomfortable realities that truth exposes. At the heart of this emotional storm stands Electra Forrester, a woman pushed beyond the limits of patience, loyalty, and trust, now standing face to face with the person who betrayed her in the most calculated and intimate way possible, her own aunt, Ivy Forrester. Electra's anger is not sudden, nor is it irrational. It is the culmination of confusion, heartbreak, and a growing sense that something about her recent experiences never quite made sense. For weeks, perhaps longer, she has been navigating emotional turbulence, strained relationships, miscommunication, and the inexplicable collapse of something that once felt stable. Now, with the truth finally revealed, those scattered fragments begin to align into a devastatingly clear picture. And with that clarity comes fury. She does not approach Ivy with hesitation. There is no uncertainty left, no room for doubt. Electra demands answers, not because she expects comfort, but because she needs to understand how someone so close to her could orchestrate such a cruel deception. Her voice carries more than anger. It carries disbelief, a kind of wounded disbelief that speaks to the depth of the betrayal. This is not just about a romantic interference. This is about trust being weaponized. Ivy, for her part, does not retreat. If anything, she leans into the confrontation with a composure that feels almost chilling. There is no frantic denial, no desperate attempt to rewrite the narrative. Instead, Ivy meets Electra's accusations with a calm, measured acknowledgement. Yes, she took the letter. Yes, she planted the necklace. Yes, she manipulated circumstances to push Electra toward R.J. Forrester. The confession comes not as a moment of collapse, but as a declaration, clear, deliberate, and utterly devoid of shame. And in that moment, something shifts irreversibly. Because Electra, despite everything, may have held on to the smallest hope that Ivy would show remorse, that beneath the calculated actions, there would be regret, an understanding of the pain she caused. But that hope is shattered almost instantly. Ivy does not apologize. She does not soften her stance. Instead, she defends it. To Ivy, her actions were not only justified, they were necessary. She frames her manipulation as a form of protection, a misguided attempt to save Electra from what she perceives as a destructive relationship with Will Spencer. In Ivy's mind, Will is not a partner worth trusting, but a reflection of the Spencer legacy, a lineage she associates with instability, betrayal, and emotional harm. Her judgment is absolute, leaving no room for nuance or growth. And from that rigid perspective, every action she took becomes, in her eyes, an act of intervention rather than interference. It is a dangerous kind of certainty, the kind that allows a person to cross moral boundaries without hesitation. Electra, however, sees it for what it is. Not protection, not concern, control. Her response is immediate and visceral. Any possibility of gratitude, something Ivy seems to expect, or at least believe is deserved, is met with outright rejection. There is no appreciation to be found here, no acknowledgement of good intentions. Because intent, in this case, cannot erase impact. And the impact has been devastating. Electra's heartbreak now transforms into something more resolute. This is no longer just an emotional reaction. It is a decision. A line is drawn, clear and unmistakable. Ivy has crossed it, and there is no going back. The idea of severing ties is no longer unthinkable. It becomes necessary. To cut off a family member is not a decision made lightly, especially in a world where legacy and bloodlines carry so much weight. But Ivy's actions have redefined the relationship entirely. She is no longer simply an aunt who made a mistake. She is someone who deliberately manipulated, deceived, and cause harm without remorse. And that changes everything. Electra's declaration, when it comes, is likely to be final. She will not continue a relationship built on betrayal. She will not maintain proximity to someone who sees her life as something to be engineered rather than respected. And in that moment, Ivy loses more than an argument. She loses a connection that may never be restored. Yet even as this confrontation reaches its emotional peak, another conflict begins to intensify elsewhere, one that mirrors the same themes of identity, resentment, and misplaced judgment. R.J. Forrester, already volatile, finds himself once again clashing with Will Spencer. But this time, the stakes feel even higher, the words sharper, the tension more combustible. R.J.'s hostility has become almost habitual, a pattern of behavior driven by unresolved insecurity and a need to assert dominance in a space where he feels increasingly threatened. Will, however, is no longer content to absorb the attacks in silence. When he finally responds, his words are not just defensive, they are precise. He targets the very foundation of R.J.'s identity, reminding him that he is not, in the purest sense, a Forrester by blood. The mention of the Marone lineage is not incidental. It is intentional, a calculated strike meant to destabilize R.J. in the same way R.J. has been attempting to destabilize him. It works, because for R.J., identity is not just a matter of heritage. It is a source of internal conflict he has never fully resolved. To have that vulnerability exposed so directly, so publicly, is more than humiliating. It is destabilizing, and in that destabilization lies the potential for escalation. This exchange does not resolve anything. It deepens the divide. Meanwhile, Will stands on the edge of a revelation that will reframe everything he thought he understood about his relationship with Electra. Until now, the breakdown between them may have seemed like a tragic but organic unraveling. Miscommunication, emotional distance, unresolved tension. But the truth, once uncovered, is far more disturbing. Ivy orchestrated it. The realization does not arrive gently. It hits with force, reshaping Will's perspective in an instant. Suddenly, the confusion clears. The inconsistencies make sense. The moments that felt off, the reactions that seemed disproportionate, they all trace back to a single source of manipulation. And with that clarity comes anger. Not the impulsive, reactive anger of frustration, but something deeper, a sense of violation. Because what Ivy interfered with was not just a relationship, but the trust that sustained it. She did not merely influence outcomes, she altered reality. Will's response, when it comes, is likely to be unrestrained. He will not accept Ivy's justification. He will not entertain her perspective, because from where he stands, there is no justification strong enough to excuse what she has done. The pain she caused, both to him and to Electra, is not something that could be rationalized away. Together, Electra and will become a united front, their shared anger directed squarely at Ivy. And in that unity lies a kind of poetic irony. The very relationship Ivy sought to dismantle may find renewed strength in the face of her betrayal. But that does not erase the damage. Trust, once broken, does not return easily. Even if Electra and will find their way back to each other, the shadow of what happened will linger. Questions will remain. Doubts, however small, will persist. Because manipulation, once revealed, changes how every past moment is perceived. As for Ivy, her position becomes increasingly precarious. She stands by her choices, unwavering, convinced of her own righteousness. But conviction does not shield her from consequences. If anything, it isolates her further. Because in a world where relationships are built on trust, her refusal to acknowledge wrongdoing places her outside the very system she seeks to control. And that isolation may prove to be her greatest vulnerability. The events of this episode do not offer resolution. They offer reckoning. Electra must come to terms with the loss of a familial bond. Will must process the realization that his relationship was manipulated from the outside. RJ must confront the consequences of his escalating hostility. And Ivy, perhaps for the first time, must face the possibility that her actions have not strengthened her position, but destroyed it. What makes this moment so powerful is not just the drama, but the emotional truth underlying it. Every character is forced to confront not only what has happened, but what it says about them, their values, their choices, their capacity for both harm and growth. And as the dust begins to settle, one thing becomes clear. Nothing will ever be the same again. In the ever-shifting, emotionally charged world of the bold and the beautiful, truth rarely arrives gently. It crashes in, uninvited, unrelenting, and often at the worst possible moment. The latest revelations surrounding R.J. Forrester, Melissa Dillon, and Ivy Forrester suggest that the delicate balance of power inside Forrester Creations is not just beginning to crack, it is on the verge of collapse. And this time, the consequences may be far more dangerous than anyone anticipated. What once seemed like strategic maneuvering and emotional manipulation is now evolving into something darker, something more volatile, something that may cost people not just their careers, but their safety. At the center of this escalating storm stands R.J. Forrester, a young man who once appeared driven by ambition and a desire to prove himself, but who now finds himself spiraling into a place where anger overrides judgment. RJ's frustration did not emerge overnight. It has been building slowly, fed by feelings of inadequacy, resentment, and a lingering belief that he is not being taken seriously within his own family's empire. For someone born into the Forrester legacy, that kind of insecurity can be suffocating. It twists perception, distorts intention, and ultimately leads to decisions that feel justified in the moment, but catastrophic in hindsight. RJ's latest actions, particularly his aggressive push to have Spencer and Melissa Dillon fired, reveal just how far he has drifted from reason. What he frames as a necessary correction, a cleansing of the company from perceived threats, is, in reality, an attempt to assert control in a situation where he feels increasingly powerless. And yet, the irony is impossible to ignore. In trying to establish dominance, RJ has only exposed his own instability. Because Spencer is not the problem. From every observable angle, has done what was asked of him. He has maintained professionalism, kept personal matters separate from business, and even taken responsibility where it was not entirely his to bear. His willingness to step down, an offer made not out of guilt but out of a desire to restore order, should have been seen as an act of integrity. Instead, it was dismissed, overshadowed by accusations that had little to do with his actual behavior and everything to do with RJ's personal vendetta. There is something deeply revealing in RJ's fixation on Will. It is not just about business decisions or workplace disagreements. It is about projection. RJ sees in Will what he fears in himself, a reflection of a legacy he does not fully control, a reminder of expectations he may not be able to meet. And rather than confront that fear, he redirects it outward, transforming Will into a convenient target. But even that does not fully explain the intensity of RJ's behavior, because behind the anger lies something even more dangerous: influence. Ivy Forrester's presence in this narrative cannot be separated from RJ's descent into conflict. Where RJ provides the emotional volatility, Ivy supplies the strategic precision. She does not lash out impulsively. She calculates. She observes. She identifies weaknesses, both in people and in situations, and then she exploits them with unsettling efficiency. Her manipulation of those around her, particularly Electra and Will, has already begun to unravel, but the damage has been done. What makes Ivy particularly dangerous is not just her actions, but her mindset. She does not operate under the illusion that she is doing something wrong. On the contrary, she appears to believe in the necessity of her choices. That conviction allows her to move forward without hesitation, without remorse, and without the internal conflict that might otherwise slow her down. It is a kind of moral detachment that turns calculated risks into calculated harm. And now, as the truth begins to surface. Both RJ and Ivy are finding themselves in a position they may not have anticipated. Exposed. The revelation of Ivy's manipulations, brought into the light through Daphne Walton's honesty with Electra Forrester, marks a turning point. For so long, Ivy operated in the shadows, her influence subtle enough to avoid direct confrontation. But with Electra now aware of what has been happening behind the scenes, that dynamic changes completely. Electra is not someone who ignores betrayal. Her response, while not yet fully revealed, carries the weight of someone who has been pushed too far. The emotional impact of discovering that she has been manipulated, not just by a distant adversary, but by someone within her own family, cannot be overstated. It is the kind of realization that forces immediate action, that demands accountability. And that accountability is likely to extend beyond Ivy alone. Because once the truth is fully uncovered, the question becomes unavoidable. Who else knew? This is where Melissa Dillon's role becomes critically important. Dillon exists in a morally ambiguous space, one shaped by fear, desire, and a series of choices that cannot easily be undone. Her connection to Ivy's schemes, whether direct or indirect, places her in a precarious position, one where silence may be interpreted as complicity. And in a corporate environment like Forrester Creations, perception can be just as damaging as reality. Steffi Forrester, who has shown no interest in firing Dillon based on external pressure, may be forced to reconsider if evidence emerges that Dillon knowingly allowed manipulation to continue. Trust, once broken within a professional setting, is difficult to restore. And while Steffi values loyalty, she values the integrity of the company even more. Ridge Forrester, as co-CEO, finds himself in an equally difficult position. Leadership is not just about making decisions. It is about making the right decisions under pressure. And this situation offers no easy answers. Firing Ivy may seem like the obvious choice, given her repeated involvement in conflict and deception. But what about RJ? That question is far more complicated. RJ is not just an employee. He is family. Removing him from his position would carry emotional consequences that extend far beyond the office. Yet allowing his behavior to continue unchecked sends a message that could undermine the entire structure of authority within the company. This is the paradox Ridge and Steffi must navigate. The intersection of personal loyalty and professional responsibility. Meanwhile, outside the boardroom, another force looms. One that may escalate the situation beyond corporate consequences and into something far more dangerous. Bill Spencer. Bill is not known for restraint. When it comes to protecting his family, particularly his son, he does not hesitate. RJ's treatment of Will, his accusations, his hostility, his relentless pressure, has not gone unnoticed. And while Bill may initially approach the situation through business channels, there's a very real possibility that his response will become personal. Threats, whether explicit or implied, may begin to surface. And if that happens, RJ will find himself in unfamiliar territory. Because there is a significant difference between corporate conflict and personal danger. One can be managed through strategy and negotiation. The other operates on a completely different level, one where consequences are immediate, unpredictable, and often irreversible. Speculation that RJ could begin receiving death threats may seem extreme at first glance, but within the context of this unfolding drama, it is not entirely implausible. The intersection of power, betrayal, and hidden secrets creates an environment where escalation is not just possible, it is likely. And Dillon's storyline adds yet another layer of uncertainty to this already volatile situation. Her connection to past events, particularly those shrouded in mystery and potential criminality, introduces the possibility that the threats RJ faces may not come from Bill alone. If Dillon is entangled in something larger, something darker, then the consequences of exposing her or aligning against her could extend far beyond corporate retaliation. This raises a chilling possibility that RJ, in his attempt to assert control and eliminate perceived threats, may have inadvertently placed himself in the crosshairs of something far more dangerous than he understands. What makes this narrative so compelling is the convergence of these different threads. Each character operates from their own motivations, their own fears, their own desires. And yet, their actions intersect in ways that amplify the stakes for everyone involved. RJ seeks validation but finds himself losing control. Ivy seeks influence but risks losing everything. Dylan seeks self-preservation but may be forced to confront the consequences of her silence. Electra seeks truth and may become the catalyst for a reckoning. Ridge and Steffi seek stability but must navigate a situation that offers none. And Bill seeks justice on his own terms. As the story moves forward, the question is no longer whether consequences will come. It is how severe they will be. Will Ivy be exposed and removed, her manipulations finally brought to an end? Will RJ face repercussions for his behavior, or will his position within the family shield him from accountability? Will Dylan's secrets come to light? And if they do, what impact will they have on those around her? And perhaps most importantly, how far will Bill go to protect his son? In a world where power is currency and loyalty is constantly tested, the line between right and wrong becomes increasingly blurred. Characters are forced to make decisions not based on clear moral boundaries, but on survival, on instinct, on the need to maintain control in a situation that is rapidly slipping away. The tragedy, as always, lies in the realization that many of these choices could have been avoided. If RJ had chosen restraint over aggression, if Ivy had chosen honesty over manipulation, if Dylan had chosen truth over silence. But those choices were not made. And now, the consequences are coming. Relentless, unforgiving.